magnetic. Everyone he touches, he has this way of bringing them into deals and partnerships.
He's playing the same role he played in the bar in the Taj.
It's the same role as in the Sea Lounge. It's the same role in the Harbour Bar. It's the same role in 1984 when he was convicted for the first time for smuggling heroin from Pakistan and did the first deal ever with the security establishment. And, you know, if you look through the evolution of this remarkable traitorous character, what you can see is that he always betrays the people who are closest to him, whether it's his best friend, Rana, whose vehicle he uses to smuggle the drugs without Rana knowing in 1984, whether it's his wives who don't know of each other's existence and then discover it by going through his call logs in the phone, whether or not it's the drug syndicates who paid him and then he turned over to work for the DEA, or Lashkar, who took him in 2000, for better or worse, in 2001, 2002, and then he betrays them, offering a better deal to the Americans. At all stages, it's a treacherous relationship in which he advances himself.
And also, you've pointed out that the third wife, Faiza, tried to go to the Americans in Islamabad, to the embassy, and got rebuffed twice. She wasn't the only one. I mean, she was the last person who made that warning about David Headley. His mother tried to go to the FBI. His mother's friend tried to go to the FBI. His first wife, Canadian woman he married in New York, she went to the FBI. I mean, there were multiple warnings.
Why do you think he was... The perception in India is that he was let off lightly by the Americans because he knows far too much about having been somebody who was working for the Americans, and they cannot afford to have that come out.
Absolutely. I mean, he's been packaged up and put somewhere where no one can get to him. I mean, it's an extraordinary situation which has been taken very quietly if you look about it. I mean, I saw that Bruce Riedel, who was 30 years in the CIA and the special advisor to President Clinton and to President Obama, who came to deliver a message to Manmohan Singh when Obama came in, saying that we know what happened in 26/11, and we want you to know that we understand the involvement of the ISI.
And that Pakistan is the problem.
And that Pakistan was the problem here. He wrote a very interesting commentary on the book, which came out 2 days ago, on Lawmaker, which is part of the Brookings Institute. Yeah. And he endorsed the argument in the book that, in a sense, America pursued a narrow national interest because the prime objective was the capture of Osama. And it may well be that in that it skewed its priorities, and in a sense it sacrificed Mumbai. Because if Raw IB had known that the node for the intelligence was in fact Headley
himself,
perhaps they would have prioritized that information more than being deluged by the general, avalanche of intelligence.
Or the Headley would not have been able to come and go out of India with the ease that he was able to.
Yeah,
was there ever an alert about Headley himself?
Never. No, he came 7 times. In fact, we were standing in the immigration queue this morning at 5:30, and I said to Adrian, there's the camera that took the picture of him on his last trip in July 2008. No, he was allowed to come and go without any problem whatsoever. On one passport, which was full of Pakistani visas as well.
And not only that, but in the end, there's a bit of the tug of war that occurred then, because the actual way that Headley was caught was in the end by British intelligence that was tracking him on the way to the attack in Denmark. And they had also intercepted, as we now know through Snowden, that they're all over our Blackberries. They'd been inside his text messages, they'd been inside his emails, and when it became clear he was communicating with Al-Qaeda, MI6 said no more, and they arrested him. And that was against the interests of the CIA.
And you're saying that if, in a sense, MI6 had not been onto him, would the CIA have actually picked him up? We don't know.
Well,
did the Americans want him behind bars? Let's put it like that.
No, they wanted to catch Osama, and we know what happened then, because we've all seen Zero Dark 30, and we've all read the SEAL team accounts. And the whole push was to decapitate Al-Qaeda and gain this kind of propagandistic victory, rather than actually looking at the sacrifices that were made along the way. This is our contention.
I mean, one day, we're trying at the moment, one day he will tell his own story. And it'll be a fascinating story, but I'm sure there'll be...
Blockbuster.
It'll be a blockbuster, but how much
That's
of it is
if he's
true?
able to tell the truth. I mean, there'd be so many shades of truth to his story.
Yes. I mean, it'll still be interesting. It'll be like Shantaram, no?
It'll be a fascinating tale.
Now, You say that much of the intelligence that was being passed on to India was actually being digested or procured from Headley himself. What happens to this intelligence as it's passed along? Because we can feel cynical about the Americans sacrificing Mumbai, but we first have to look inwards and say, what the hell were we doing with the alerts we were getting? How specific? You did say the locations are identified as possible targets. How specific were the intelligence inputs that were shared, these 26 alerts that came in from the CIA?
Well, they were very specific, as Adrian's already said, that identifying the targets, the methodology, the manpower, the fact it would be a Fedayeen attack, the fact that the guys who would attack would be told to find a stronghold position and take hostages and keep it going as long as possible, the fact that they wanted to maximise publicity, and the fact it was Lashkar's attempt to sort of storm the world stage and recapture the lost publicity that they had lost out to Al-Qaeda because they were feeling that no one really knew about Lashkar anymore. I mean, it was very, very specific, but I think some of these questions should be directed to Pradhan because that was what his job was, to investigate exactly what was coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see very clearly from the chronology, and it's incontestable, that nothing was taken seriously until June, July 2008. So in the 2 years prior, that information was just stacked alongside so many other pieces of information. But we know that in June, July 2008, the Mumbai police responsible for Zone 1 no longer were happy with that response, and they began going around every single one of those targets and began street clearance. They moved hawkers off the streets. They were conscious that bombs may go off in the city and wanted to minimize damage. They confronted the hotels. They went to deliver messages to businesses saying the city is likely to come under attack. And the only thing that was wrong in the intelligence that was passed was the date. That was the only piece of information that was wrong. But, you know, it is a difficult business, I guess. You could argue actually preventing. It's a needle in the haystack business. But really, what we thought, and perhaps this is the most apposite thing to say, is should not all of this, the human tragedy, the political conspiracy, the double agent, every aspect of this, the city of loss, the humiliation and the suffering, have been the subject of a broad and wide post-mortem of the kind that happened after 9/11, of the kind that happened after 7/7 in London, and not a narrow inquiry like the Pradhan Commission that produced 64 pages.
And had no jurisdiction, in a sense, in being able to force central agencies to cooperate with it.
It's not their fault.
Didn't speak to most of the security forces that were actually involved on the night. I mean,
no one who was there was asked the right questions.
So you're saying, why isn't there a 26/11 commission in the same way that there was a 9/11 commission?
Well, not now. Why wasn't there then? Why was it that the political task was to cover up rather than to improve? And everyone will tell you that within the establishment. Privately, that they felt dismay that there was no critical evaluation of failure rather than an attempt to create a veneer.
I'll tell you what's worse. What's worse is that some things actually didn't change even after 26/11. And Mumbai knows that the most recent terror attacks that hit the city, I remember interviewing the Chief Minister, Prithviraj Chavan, and he told me that his own telephone, his own cell phone did not work for the first 10 minutes. He was trying to reach the police commissioner, and the cell phones were jammed, and the CCTV cameras that weren't there in 26/11 still weren't there by the time these attacks happened because of some bureaucratic delay in nobody being willing to sign the file. So that's how dismal it is. But I'm just wondering, in all your conversations with intelligence officials, did you feel that there was a kind of passing the buck? I mean, do you feel that, nobody was stepping up to the plate and taking responsibility? Because we kept getting this response at that time, and this phrase sticks in my mind: the intelligence was not actionable.
Yes, you know, there's another mantra that came about after Mumbai, and I quote this to everybody. Everyone said to me, and I heard it recently on your show as well, that Mumbai was a failure of the imagination.
Yeah.
You know, but when you know about what happened, it's a failure of the known, not the unknown. There was more known than not known, to use the horrible American expression.
Why do you think our agencies or our first responders, actually I wouldn't blame our first responders because some of them were extraordinarily
they did
brave.
an extraordinary job. Yeah.
Why was there a systemic failure? Because that's what it was.
I think it comes down to funding more than anything else, and a malaise as well. I think there's just so much to do, so much going on, so many threats coming in, so many warnings coming in, that for actually someone to take the decision to sit down and sift through them and find out which are the serious ones and actually do something about it, you've got to stick your neck out, you've got to take risks, you've got to potentially go against your senior officers. I think for many of those reasons that it didn't happen.
No entrepreneurialness encouraged within the remit of intelligence. That's what IB said to us time and time again, that you know, no one is encouraged to stick their neck out, as Kathy just said. There's no encouragement to pursue the line ruthlessly. You know, what there is a lot of box sticking, and there's stovepiping between RAW and IB, between IB, the district, the state level and the centre. And then the police feel that they get the short shrift because by the time they receive the information, it's not actionable.
But can I just say that there is still an opportunity now to have a proper inquiry, a proper commission into 2611, so that the city is safer in the future. I mean, we've spoken to people today who say that there is a security alert going on in Mumbai right now, and I would guarantee that the police will have the same limited responses, limited ability, limited weaponry, limited body armour. They're no better equipped than they were last time around. And
they're betrayed by the bureaucrats in the sense that they continually tell us, and they told us over the years, that, and we could see the requisition orders with NSG and with the police in Mumbai, nearly everything they asked for, they were refused.
And we will get to that in a moment, but you know, in terms of the fact that, and you write about this, and this is known, the absence of bulletproof jackets, the absence of ammunition for basic training, all of these are glaring holes in our security system. But decision making is also crucial, and the absence of integrated decision making. And you say in your book, and this was really disturbing to me personally, because I kept thinking, what if it hadn't been done like this? And this bizarre decision for the police to stand down till the National Security Guard gets in. Firstly, even more bizarre that the NSG cannot get in because there isn't a plane for them. This we know. We know that they come 12 hours late. Hassan Ghafoor takes this decision. But is Hassan Ghafoor really senior enough to make a call like this? Is nobody asking what's happening from Delhi? Is there nobody to overrule him? Because it seems to me extraordinary that the decision is basically to stand down till the NSG gets in, which is, in other words, to do nothing.
Yes, it was a blind implementation, blind and partial implementation of what they described as the standard operating procedure. And what it said in black and white on the paper was that the appropriate force should arrive. And the designated force was NSG, but the state hadn't designated NSG. So the police were waiting because they read their sheet of paper. We saw the paper that Hassan Ghafoor had.
But there was nothing, apart from saying the appropriate force should arrive, there was no proviso for what should happen before the appropriate force should arrive.
No proviso. So you then have the situation of the wait that's created, and then ultimately the city saved itself in that time. I mean, you know, we've identified all the things that are wrong, the things that we can feel bad about. But actually in that time, certain members of the police, pretty much naked, went into the hotel and saved a whole load of people. And alongside that, despite what Hassan Ghafoor said, a numerous number of people within the Taj establishment, very lowly paid, within the guest body of the hotel, saved others. And so really, as much as anything, what this can say to you is that Mumbai will save itself all over again. Ordinary people do extraordinary things, and that actually is the essence of what drew us to the story, because if you pick out any of those threads, you'll see that people who you may not expect to step up, stepped up. And that began from 9:48 in Leopold's, and that continued until the Saturday.
I think that's an important thing to reiterate, that we didn't come to this project looking for a controversy, looking to attack security forces. We came to it because we wanted to chronicle the stories of the heroes of the Taj and the people who saved lives that night. And in the doing of the research, we uncovered painful truths about the security force responses. But as Adrian says, within the
No,
police.
of
There were
course,
individual officers who did an incredible job.
Yeah, no, extraordinary tales of heroism, of course, have to be acknowledged. It's interesting to hear that that was the original purpose or the mission of your book, and then you stumble upon all these really staggering facts and revelations. But I still keep thinking, can a police commissioner in a terror attack, not on a city, but an act of war against a country, which is what it was, can he take these decisions on his own to say, let the police stand down? Is there nobody on the hotline to him from Delhi? Who was he talking to? I mean, I know you describe how Rakesh Maria is prowling around in the control room, getting more and more exasperated. But who is talking to the police at this time? There are people who want to know, okay, the NSG couldn't reach, why couldn't you just call in the army? Why couldn't you just call in the Navy? There are enough security forces around. Para-commandos could have been called in. Anybody could have been called in.
Well, there was a lot of buck passing, as you know, when you go down the chronology. Actually, let's just go back one stage. I've just used the word there, chronology. The first thing we should say is there's no agreed chronology.
Yes.
Okay, so if we begin from the fact there was no post-mortem, because there's no post-mortem and no one matched the technical metadata to witness statements, there's no agreed chronology, which means whether you're reading the congressional account from Washington or you're reading the police logs,
which are not as they were on the night,
they don't tally. And then the police logs changed halfway through, and now if you follow the case that's going on in Mumbai, the hard drives containing the logs have been wiped. So actually, the timeline itself is an issue of controversy. The standard operating procedure is an issue of controversy. And the backwatching that meant that, you know, the naval marines didn't want to come in because they said it wasn't their job. The Black Hats had not been designated to come in, but mobilized anyhow in 45 minutes. They were standing in Palam airstrip ready to go because officers went against the standard operating procedure and knew from watching the TV footage that this was a job for them.
They were there at 10:30 p.m.
They were there. They were there. They were there without lifting gear, without plane, without fuel, without pilots. They were there.
Without the authorization of the Maharashtrian government.
And their leadership took that decision against the wishes of the Home Ministry. So what we have here is a series of box ticking that discouraged entrepreneurship, that meant that no one force wanted to take responsibility and they all stepped down.
And the absence of freedom to take your decisions without fear of repercussion.
Absolutely.
But, from this discussion, it's quite clear again that there does have to be some kind of commission or inquiry that looks at these issues and questions with all of the data, with access to all of the agencies involved, and everyone has to be free and honest in their responses, because we can't answer some of these questions either. We're not within the system. We are.
And honestly, the cynicism is that we don't know, unless there is a commission like that, perhaps none of these questions are ever going to be, because we just hit walls when you ask these questions beyond the obvious sort of lapses.
Can I tell you two interesting things? Well, one thing that I discovered from all the years of working with Kathy, mostly this is Kathy's work, which I'm claiming for myself now, but actually all of Kathy's years of working inside and close to jihad and Islamist groups in Pakistan, is that they have a lessons learned facility. Like Lashkar is incredibly disciplined as an outfit, incredibly disciplined in terms of how it organizes, indoctrinates and trains. And what it does is it studies every one of its operations, breaks them down and improves them. And it does that through a series of very precise intellectual, psychological and military procedures spread across bases from Lahore to Muzaffarabad.
Are you saying the Lashkar-e-Taiba has done a deeper post-mortem of their attack on Mumbai than we have done of our failures to prevent it?
That's exactly the situation. And they look at themselves and they say, how would we do it better?
And they'll be doing that all the time. They'll be doing that now, which is why there has to be a commission here. Because if it happens again, here or in another Indian city or in London or New York or wherever, then people will similarly be ill-prepared. But
also, you raised the issue of buck watching, and I was thinking that, you know, there are so many people who would talk if they were given indemnity to talk. I remember I was in Srinagar, and I got a call from an IB agent, and he said, come and meet someone I knew. And so we went, and I was a little alarmed, and I chose Coffee Day so we could meet in a public place at night. And I didn't really know what he wanted, and it was very unconventional the way the call had come. And he said, when we sat down over coffee, I know you've been in town for a few days, and I'm really disturbed that you've not come to find me. And I said, well, I have been trying, but you've not been in. And he said, I know, I've spent days following Barker Dutt.
Oops.
You were in Srinagar at the time, doing Dal Lake and your special show. But the point was, and he made this point over an hour and a half, that there were people within the organisation that if they were given
the indemnity to talk,
they would do it, and they would do it in the way that the security services did it in London after 7/7, in camera, with names removed, with statements that were shorn of personal identifiers. But they felt they had a contribution to make, and that debate was stifled.
No, absolutely. And you also write about how this siege, in a sense, was made possible at an estimated cost of $40,000. Is that correct? $40,000, a rubber dinghy and basic Skype telephony, and using people like us who were unwittingly sort of helping the terrorists. And I want to bring up the role of the media, because we came at the receiving end of a lot of anger without realizing actually what we were doing. And I was there for all of those 72 hours. I was able to get in from Delhi the next morning. And it took us about 24 hours to figure out that everything we were saying was being monitored by these men inside and being passed on to the handlers, or was being monitored by the handlers and being passed on to the men inside. And one of the big failings, and once of course we realized this, almost every cable news channel went on to a 15-minute delay in everything that was being transmitted. But it's so bizarre that the advisory to delay live broadcasts came to us in writing 72 hours after this began. So there was no communication from anybody in the government. We sort of figured this out on our own. I don't even remember how we figured it out in the chaos, and we just said, oh, it's probably safer to just delay the live broadcast. But I'm just wondering, how was the technology of this operation kind of set up? Because it wasn't that elaborate, it wasn't that sophisticated.
It was incredibly simple, and the 40,000 figure is absolutely correct. $40,000 to set up a house in Malia town in Karachi, which has just got TV terminals, it's got computer connections, broadband. It was not sophisticated at all. Just the ability, just a laptop. Shrewd, yes, shrewd and imaginative, which is always the way they're going to work. They are going to use what is available in the public domain in an imaginative way. And I mean, who could have imagined